welcome to Jurassic Park 3 Minute. We'll be discussing the second Jurassic Park sequel, 1 minute at a time. I'm Brad.
I'm Dave.
And today we're back to discuss minute 40 of Jurassic Park 3. But before we get to that, David, this last couple of weeks, or even last week, fans have been thrown into a frenzy by a title that appeared briefly on Netflix. Jurassic World Cretaceous Camp. No, Camp Cretaceous.
Camp Cretaceous.
Yeah.
It was up there like very briefly. I don't even think it was up there for a full 24 hours.
Yeah,
At least not after it was discovered.
No, there has been a sort of a corresponding logo going around as well, which we've learnt is actually fake and just sort of fan mock-up. But
yeah,
this is pure speculation. There's nothing apart from that title that came up and disappeared. I think Universal have confirmed that it is licensed under their name. That's what's coming from the Outpost article here anyway. That it could be a Universal partnership. So
it could be. I was also thinking children's show as well, or even like I know that what was it? Did we discuss about how Mattel is licensing like 20 of their properties out to make TV shows?
We may have mentioned it briefly before, but you can bring it up again.
So Mattel is also licensed out 20 of their brands to become television shows. I'm not sure if it's through Netflix or through whom, but there's been speculation that Jurassic Park might be among those since it's one of their best-selling brands that they've currently got. And this could be it, maybe?
Yeah, it definitely possibly could be. If we knew that was coming for a while now, and if you got Mattel making all the money on the toys and Netflix and Universal partnering up, then the budget should be there for something good. But I suppose in a bit of speculation territory here, we can pretty much confirm what it's not going to be. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be a TV series based before the opening or the Jurassic Park incident.
No.
It's not going to be a rounding up the dinosaurs on Nublar before the opening of Jurassic World and the building of Jurassic World.
No, though that actually did make something of an appearance. Apparently there is a Jurassic Park animated series it was like some kind of promotional thing that would have been shown to Spielberg, but Spielberg never got to see it, and is now making the rounds among like the behind the scenes of the Jurassic community.
So it's been leaked out.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
I'm not sure if the whole thing has been leaked out, or if just the one image we know of that has been leaked out. But yeah, from what sources have told me, it's real. Like, this is actually something that it was a pitch trailer that had been put together and just never used, and this was for the Jurassic Park animated series that had been originally pitched to Spielberg before The Lost World.
That's interesting. I suppose one other thing that could boost that as what this possibly could be is the fact that Universal have already got one deal with exclusivity for Netflix for their upcoming Fast and the Furious animated series, which is getting done by DreamWorks Animation. So that's coming out later this year, and that's the Fast and Furious is one of their other big franchises. So if they've already got that going to animation, then maybe this is going to be an animated feature and not a live action TV show type thing.
Another thing to consider is the fact, another thing to consider is that it might be Lego, but it probably isn't, just because I know that a lot of kind of the Lego Jurassic World stuff has been getting promoted a bit, but if it was Lego, I would imagine it would say like Jurassic World Lego Camp Cretaceous or something, or Lego Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous or something like that.
Yeah, plus they're already working on a Lego feature for this year already. I don't think they'd have plans for something for 2020 yet.
So yeah, I think we can rule out Lego probably.
Yeah. Yep. So in the title itself, I don't, with live action. The problem is a lot of the sets no longer exist. They'd have to build the budget behind it to build anything if it's sort of goes on coexisting while Jurassic World's open. If it's something set on Nublar during the days of the park being open, and it's sort of like somewhere for the kids to go to while the parents are out golfing or something like that, that's maybe not the petting zoo or maybe attached to the petting zoo, but there's a big budget there they've got to sort of pay for either sets or animatronics or even the CG dinosaurs themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another problem is budget, just because, I mean, CGI is expensive, especially good CGI, which you come to expect from the Jurassic World brand. And it's just interesting because I remember the Lost World TV show when I was a kid from the 90s. Not sure if you remember that. And I remember watching it every week and always be disappointed every time because they barely showed any dinosaurs. Ever.
But not even the dinosaurs, like the giant bees or any of the other sort of mythical things they come across, or animals they come across, was the same sort of problem, because it was all, being that time of the 90s, it was all CG and they didn't even get someone in a suit for the most part. I suppose one other thing to sort of tie in this briefly as well is the fact that Steven Spielberg's recently got up on the Apple bandwagon with their new Apple TV service they're bringing out and making a show for that, and then all of a sudden this Netflix thing appears and disappears pretty much in the same week. You'd think if there was anything Jurassic related for Netflix, Spielberg would have to have some sort of say in it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd assume he'd be similar to the pre-Disney buyout anyway of Lucasfilm, where George Lucas had final say on whatever was coming out of the studio. Because Spielberg's still pretty heavily involved in the Jurassic franchise, even if he's not sitting in the main chair.
That's true. I mean, he is, but only as an executive producer. I think it's pretty much, he's passed that torch on to Trevorrow from pretty much. Whereas Trevorrow is more the day-to-day overseer of the Jurassic franchise these days, taking over from what Spielberg used to be doing that. But then again, Spielberg was never really attached to the Jurassic Park franchise as much as Lucas was to Star Wars.
Yeah, true.
And mostly because of Lucas was being attached to Star Wars. Spielberg and Lucas were friends way back, and he just saw Lucas become enveloped in Star Wars and was like, nah, I don't want that.
Well, that's it. You can only imagine if Spielberg come back and directed these three new films, much like George went back and come out and done the prequel trilogy. The time will tell what this is going to be. There's speculation all over the place. There's what people are hoping for in certain groups and social media, and it's just way too early. It's all hope at the moment. But it is good that there is something coming. Because as I said, like the last couple of years, they've released these Lego features, and yes, it's extra Jurassic content, but it's not really canon. It's more for the younger people. So yeah.
This is how you make dinosaurs?
No. This is how you play God.
Alright, lastly, before we get into today's minutes, these last couple of weeks we've been discussing a lot about the laboratory complex and everything inside and outside of it, and we've been bringing up a lot about the Lost World novel and some of the comparisons there. If you haven't got the novel, or if you haven't read it for a while, you can head over to Jurassic. Why do I always have such an issue with this? Head over to Jurassic-Pedia.com, and there is a lab entry over there done by CT1138. Do we know that person, or are they no longer on there?
Oh, of course I know. He's me.
Oh, that's you! Alright, I'll amend that. So head over there. There is an entry on the laboratory complex done by David, yours truly. We don't have a lot of photos. We've only got really that map image from the first pages, some of the books. But Dave, you've got a full write-up here of the lab as we sort of walk through it in the novel.
Yeah, there's pretty much went through the novel and just not copied word for word, but just pretty much transferred the entire description of the complex to Pedia.
Yep. Yeah, and there's a lot of good stuff in there. Like I do love when they started getting into the assembly bays and that, and you've got the just like the wall signs. There'd been authorised personnel only, and just stuff like that. And the little note they find in the locker about observing sterile precautions and safety is everyone's business.
Mrs. Kirby, the chances are remote they're still in the vicinity.
Alright, ready to get into minute 40.
Sure.
As we enter minute 39 of Jurassic Park 3, Amanda had started to walk amongst the large specimen tubes filled with formaldehyde, until she come to one with seemingly preserved raptor head inside. As we over minute 40, she slowly peers towards the tube. Inside, the raptor eye focuses, and she pulls back, startled. The raptor immediately springs its trap, moving to the right and sticking its head between the two tanks. But the gap's too narrow and the body can't fit through there, and Amanda screams. At the 9-second mark, she starts running down the production floor. The raptor turns and parallels the movements behind the tanks. The group come to the end of the production floor and head into a small corridor. The raptor finds a broken tank and leaps between the gap, chasing after. At the 16-second mark, we cut to a corridor as Alan and the others run down, trying to find an escape. They enter a room with long rows of cages and run down to the end of the corridor, only to find a door locked. When they turn to run back in the direction they just come, the raptor slides in a wet spot and blocks their escape. At the 40-second mark, Hidesky calls this way, and takes Paul and Grant with him into a nearby cage, and they close the door. Behind them, Paul and Amanda run through another cage, but before they can get the door closed, the raptor slams into it. They try and hold the cage door closed, but the raptor's too strong, and slowly pushes it open and round until it comes to meet the cage wall behind, trapping Billy and Amanda in a small space, but keeping them safe from the raptor. At the 50-second mark, Hidesky is calling, "Hey, over here, over here," but the raptor's focused on Billy and Amanda, snarling, trying to get through the mesh gate. And as the minute ends, the raptor slowly looks upward and realises there's an opening at the top of the gate. Before we go into 40, last week when we had Jay on, we were discussing a lot about the hatchery production floor and everything else, but one little thing we didn't really discuss was the eggs themselves and whether we thought they hatched on their own and then ran off, or if some were eaten by animals that had been released by InGen. I've got Jay's notes here. I sent him a message, and he's pretty much agreed with me how maybe the young raptors and that had been released by InGen, and they've come in and eaten the food, and that's one reason why they hang around this facility and nest near it, because it was a food source for a long time, especially if you've got other hatching facilities or hatching rooms elsewhere as well. David, what do you think? Do you reckon some of these eggs had live infants in them, or when the power was switched off, that's it, they were dead and become food?
I'd have to say that most of them probably became food, if only because, I mean, these are hatchlings. They require a lot of care, pretty much like any newborn animal of any sort. You're going to be basically handling this little baby dinosaur for the next couple weeks or so, until it can basically get big enough to move and kind of fend on its own. And so, I mean, even at the height, they're about waist height to a man, and about even at that height, if one were to try to jump to the factory floor, it'd probably break a leg and die there on the floor, and then get scavenged by something that had already been born and released.
Yeah, and that's, well, even before they get to falling off the table itself, they've got the glass domes over them, so having to get out of there would be another challenge as well. And yes, some of them are broken, but that could have come from later on. It could have even come from the hurricane. When they're walking down the stairs and you see some of those second-story catwalks walking around, there's railings that are bent and broken, so it makes you wonder how damage like that can happen inside a building, especially when the windows seem intact. There's no wind in there. It can only be from animals being inside, and whether some of the eggs were close enough to term to hatch, and they did hatch on their own out of survival because the incubators were off.
I have to say that any that hadn't hatched probably did get scavenged as well. You know, I mean, most carnivores will eat just about anything. I can imagine raptors getting in there and just tearing open the eggs and eating whatever's inside.
Yeah, I do think there might have been a bit of a time frame there too. Like the eggs probably would have died long before they were eaten, depending how long it took the raptors and other animals to come back. Because you got the compies and that too that probably would have made a meal of it. But even if the animals did sort of get to the ground and still survive, being that young, it's mentioned in the novel a little bit how they were feeding the animals that young milk, a milk product, until I think it was 6 weeks or 7 weeks before they could start to eat solid foods. And animals that small aren't going to survive. It's been one of the biggest sort of speculation points too with Jurassic Park and post Jurassic Park. Those eggs we see there, if they were left to hatch, if that counted for any sort of wild raptor population on Nublar before plans of Jurassic World. And it's sort of a similar thing there. Well, the animals aren't going to be able to fend for themselves that young, especially if there's compies on Nublar, which has always been up in the air. Yes, we know sort of from DPG and that compies are only there because they come over by the boat from Nublar, and we never got them on the dinosaur lists for the park. So, but yeah, I just thought we need to bring up that little plot point before we moved on.
Yeah.
As we continue into 40, Amanda peers in close to this tank, and we can see that male raptor head. Sort of, you got those distinctive quills on its head, and a lot more coloration what we've seen in the raptors previously. And we get sort of possibly the worst look Tia Leone gives in this film, where she's sort of got that dopey face looking towards the tank, like she's looking over a set of spectacles or something. It's really weird.
I do like the shot there we get back at it when she's peering in closer, and we get the close up there of the eye. That is a really good shot, and it's only a shame that the green of the glass is kind of just ruining the look. I went and took a screen cap of that shot, and then just decreased the green levels in the image.
Yep.
And you get a really nice look of the raptor's coloration in this shot with the red along the crest on the snout and the blue surrounding the eye. You know?
Yeah, and it's sort of returned to the avian style as well, where the sort of raptors in Jurassic Park were more cat-like, and then we've seen a bit of a mix. I believe we've seen a bit of a mix in the Lost World. They weren't just cat eye, you had some of these avian eyes as well, which just sort of lent to either different version numbers or the different breeds they were creating. And here,
I think they pretty much all had the slanted cat eyes. They're only all males of the female variation, so I don't think that look changed. I think it was only the coloration of the eye that changed from like a acid green to a acid yellow.
Yeah.
I do like though that what you said though, the avian look in the eye, especially with the it almost looks like they give them an iris. You know, or not an iris. What is that? It's the iris, right?
Yeah, it's iris.
The piece around the pupil. Yeah, because it goes from the red coloration to a fiery yellow coloration, and then there's the pupil. And that's a bit more than what they did for the T-Rex for the first two movies, where it was just yellow eyes and a black pupil. You know? Yeah,
well, you can sort of see here as its eye moves, it sort of looks like that black spot gets bigger or smaller, like it's irising or in or out. Because it would have been looking at her as she was approaching, and now she's close. It'd have to shift its focus.
Well, another thing I like is that the eye itself doesn't just move; the whole socket moves. So and this is all in animatronic work in the shot. So Stan Winston made it so that when the eye moves, the whole socket kind of flexes there.
And it's just great, great to have the animatronic doing work like this. It just looks fantastic. But as you said, it's just got that green filter over it, which just sort of takes some of the color out of it.
Well, we do get good close-up headshots of this. Of this animatronic later in the movie.
Yeah, yep. But just as Amanda notices, she gives that little, sort of look, and the raptor strikes and moving to the side of the tank and trying to lunge through at her, and she pulls back in fright, but the raptor can't sort of get those hips between the two tanks, which is plot convenience.
Yeah, true. But I do like the look that we get here of the raptor. The what was it? The Jurassic Park 3 Alpha Raptor toy had this same look with the with like the brownish skin and then the red striping going down the back.
It sort of reminds me, like, you'd change the colours around a little bit and you'd nearly have the same patterns as blue.
That's true.
Sort of. I think here it's more of a whiter stripe that goes the full length of it, mixed in with those reds and greys. But we cut to Grant reacting while he's looking closely at the empty incubator, and Paul snaps up as well, and then we cut to behind the raptor as it's struggling to fit between the tanks. And sort of interesting, in the tank to the left of it, we can see it seemed to have been a fetus at one stage, but it's just sort of all disintegrated. Maybe it was a lot older.
It almost looks like a Dilophosaurus, I'd say.
Amanda screams and runs further into the area, and the raptor pulls back and sort of follows alongside, but on the opposite side of the tanks. And we get a shot pulled back at the opposite tanks as Grant and Paul start running past the staircase and that leads up to one of the catwalks above, and we're sort of right down the bottom corner of this hatching facility now.
It's interesting because if you look at, they're both at the end of, like you said, they're at the end here, and there's two staircases coming down. But if you look at the end of the opposite staircase from which they're running past, there appears to be a door there. Which would imply that, and you could almost like make out like more tubes of some sort. It makes me want to bring up the idea of maybe Wu was also keeping embryos on Sorna as well as Nublar. When I was a kid, I used to think that there was the two cryo units, because Wu had one for a set aside for the Nublar list and another set aside for the Sorna list, which of course is silly, but that's what I thought as a kid.
Yeah, and the door itself looks very that heavy militaristic door. It sort of reminds me a lot of the control room door from Jurassic Park.
And it's painted in the same color of the emergency door that they used, that they kind of mocked up onto the side of the embryonics laboratory. It's like an emergency door, and you never really see it. But if you open it, it doesn't really lead anywhere. It's just like one of those fake false doors.
Yeah, just sit in the wall.
But it's painted the same color, and if you look at this one, it has an exit sign over it, and looks like possibly even a fire alarm thing. So I wonder if this is an emergency door that would lead out to other parts of the complex in case of an evacuation.
Well, we mentioned over the last couple of minutes too with Jay about the possibility of possible tours happening here, whether it was led by Hammond or even Hammond himself touring. These catwalks themselves being up on the second floor first floor where you get a good view over the production floor itself, they don't seem to lead or have access to the robot arms or other machinery. It just sort of runs the length of the facility and then goes out through these exit doors. I wonder if this is sort of designed for VIPs and that to tour the facilities and not be down in the sterile environment with the eggs and everything else.
There'd be another possibility too, especially when you have, it's almost like an overseer catwalk, and you got the slaves down in the pits. You know,
very well paid slaves tending to eggs.
Maybe not. I mean, we really don't know the conditions of the workers at Isla Sorna, and they could have just used they could have just trained a bunch of locals to use this equipment. Never really told them what the eggs were doing, and I'd imagine workplace rumors. They're building a park island. You know, remember in the first novel how that construction worker building the raptor pit was attacked by a raptor, and he was just some Costa Rican kid.
Yeah. I suppose the one thing's missing from these catwalks is either access to, mechanical access to the arms or something for maintenance work, or some sort of control panel, because if these are automated arms, they're going to be doing their thing down on the production floor, and they're not going to let personnel down there between incubators when these things are flying backwards and forwards as well. So,
well, that brings up another interesting questioning, because as Grant kind of heads down the hallway towards the kennels, you can see what appears to be a small television or even security screen sitting on near one of the computer towers.
Yeah. And even on the incubator themselves, they seem to have a recessed screen at the very front of them, but there's no way of inputting information. Like, there's no keypad. It's just a screen that shows information. So I don't think they would have had touch screens back then.
The incubators themselves did have computer keypads on them with like a number thing and a keypad to enter information. And I can't remember if they had a screen. They might have, but yeah, they might have done that through the incubators themselves, and then set parameters for what the arms would do.
And I did last week. I did got a couple of screen caps and lightened them up a bit, and just the work, the detail the prop market went to putting, or prop works to add stuff to the end of those robotic arms. There's about 4 different attachments on either side of the arms, all different heads and attachments for. I don't know what any of it would do with eggs. Like, not one of them's got a claw or something to pick the eggs up. So it's just weird they went into that much detail on these arms when they didn't really need to, and there's no explanation of what any of that stuff actually does. But yeah, on the ground level here, I love at the end of the row of tanks there's a heap of blue toolboxes and other debris that make it look like a bit of a workshop. It looks like someone's been there working on a car or something, which is very odd for a production floor, unless this is the maintenance area, but still, you'd want some sort of sanitation or being sterile environment in there.
Well, it's possible that they were actually kind of fixing up the equipment, and by they I mean Engine Masrani, when they came back in 1999, and they had to maybe fix some of the equipment and refurbish it to do what they were doing, and then just left the stuff there when they cleared back out.
Well, and one of the easy ways to sort of go ahead with that is, okay, maybe they did get one of the other production floors up and running, and they were working or getting started on this one when they decided to pull out. It'd be one way of writing around the fact that this one here looks like it was just abandoned and not sort of reworked. But as they sort of run out of this area, we cut back to the Raptor, which has found a gap between a broken tank and another tank wide enough for it to fit, and it sort of leaps between the two. And then we cut to a hallway. As you mentioned before, Grant runs out and is followed by everyone else, and again you sort of get that heavy set door that they run out of. And a real futuristic looking fire extinguisher hanging on the wall.
I was just thinking the same thing. That looks like something out of like Rocketeer or something. You know?
Yeah. But we sort of get cages lining that wall, and on the left-hand wall seems to be solid, and you get them small barred windows high up, which looks like they're at the outside of the main building here. Now, we see they run down this hallway. There's possibly other hallways they ran to before they got to here, which was other parts of the building. But this is sort of the start of what we got to the kennels. As they run deeper, they come to a dead end, and again, like before when we're in the Embryonics Administration building, I'm loving the lighting here. You sort of got that soft sunlight shining down through the skylights. You've got those big square dirty windows again. And just sort of, just the way to set, like there's a trolley, there's some sort of debris on the ground, there's that hose reel hanging on the side of one of the cages, obviously for cleaning out the hallway. And as they get down to the end of this corridor of cages, they come to a lock